The ice moon of Fenris 7 had claimed 11 soldiers in the past week. Daniel Reeves watched through the reinforced viewport as another thermal signature flatlined on his console, somewhere in the methane storms that raged across the frozen wasteland. The expeditionary force had established their base in the caldera of an extinct cryovolcano, but even here, temperatures dropped to -200 degrees Celsius during the long night cycles. "Commander Reeves," the voice crackled through his comm unit, distorted by the electromagnetic interference that plagued all communications on this forsaken moon. "Admiral Katsaros requests permission to enter the command tent." Daniel straightened, surprised. Admiral Orla Katsaros, the Wolf Admiral, as the fleet called her, rarely left her ship in orbit. She preferred to command from the bridge of the Fenrir, watching her operations unfold from the strategic distance of space. "Permission granted," Daniel said, sealing his environmental suit's collar as the airlock cycled. The outer door hissed open, releasing a plume of frozen vapor that crystallized instantly in the tense atmosphere. Admiral Katsaros stepped through, her black thermal suit covered in a thin layer of methane frost that sublimated in the warmer air. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her pale eyes, the color of Fenris 7 distant sun, swept the command tent with predatory efficiency. "Admiral," Daniel saluted, "this is unexpected. Is there a problem with the orbital relay?" Orla removed her helmet, her breath forming small clouds despite the tense heating system struggling against the cold. "My shuttle's thermal regulator failed during descent. I've been outside for 40 minutes. Her voice was steady, but Daniel noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she set the helmet down. Hypothermia. Even with the suit's heating elements, prolonged exposure to Fenris 7 environment was deadly. "You need to warm up immediately," Daniel said, moving to the emergency supply locker. "I'll get the medical thermal blankets." "No time," Orla interrupted. She walked to the tent's entrance and engaged the magnetic locks with a decisive motion. The heavy thud of the bolts sliding into place echoed through the confined space. She turned to face him, and there was something different in her expression. Not the cold calculation he'd seen during tactical briefings, but something more desperate. "Undress." Daniel froze. "Admiral, I don't think." "That's an order, Commander." Her fingers were already working at the seals of her thermal suit. "Extreme hypothermia protocol. You know the procedure as well as I do. Skin-to-skin contact is the fastest way to transfer heat when thermal blankets aren't sufficient." She was right. Daniel had lost a squad member to hypothermia during his first tour because they'd wasted precious minutes looking for equipment instead of using the most effective method available. But this was the Wolf Admiral, the woman who had held the line at the Battle of Proxima Station, who had ordered the sacrifice of an entire frigate to save a colony world, who had a reputation for being as cold and unyielding as the void itself. "My core temperature is 89 degrees, Orla said, her suit now hanging open. The biosensors embedded in her undersuit glowed a dangerous amber. "I have maybe 20 minutes before irreversible damage sets in. We can debate protocol, or you can follow orders and keep me alive." Daniel's training overrode his hesitation. He began removing his own suit, the practical part of his mind cataloging the situation. Isolated location, communications jammed by the methane storms, no medical support for at least 3 hours. She was right. This was survival, not impropriety. They worked in silence, stripping down to base layers, then those too. The cold air bit at Daniel's skin despite the heaters running at maximum capacity. Orla's skin was pale, almost blue at her extremities. He could see her shivering now, the involuntary muscle contractions that signaled her body's desperate attempt to generate warmth. "The sleeping pod," Daniel said, gesturing to the insulated emergency shelter in the corner of the tent. It was designed for exactly this scenario, a sealed, thermally regulated space for extreme weather casualties. They climbed inside and Daniel activated the heating elements. The pod's smart fabric contracted around them, creating a cocoon of warmth. He positioned himself carefully, maximizing skin contact while maintaining as much professionalism as the situation allowed. Orla pressed against him, her body alarmingly cold. For several minutes, neither spoke. Daniel focused on his breathing, on the gradual warming of her skin against his, on anything except the profound strangeness of having the Wolf Admiral, the most feared tactical mind in the fleet, vulnerable and human in his arms. "Why did you really come down here?" he asked finally. "You could have sent anyone to deliver orbital reconnaissance data." Orla was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "I needed to see Fenris 7 for myself, to understand why we're losing so many people to this rock." "And do you understand?" "Yes." Her voice was softer now, the trembling beginning to subside. "We're fighting the wrong battle. Command wants us to establish a forward base here because the mineral surveys showed rare Earth deposits, but this moon is actively hostile to human life. Every day we stay, we lose people to an enemy we can't fight with weapons or strategy." Daniel felt her shift against him, her core temperature rising as his body heat transferred to her. The biosensors on the pod's interior wall showed her readings climbing back toward safe levels, 91 degrees, 93, 95. "What are you going to recommend?" he asked. "That we abandon Fenris 7, that some resources aren't worth the cost in human lives." She pulled back slightly to look at him, and in the dim blue light of the pod, her eyes seemed less like ice and more like winter sky, cold, yes, but vast and clear. "They'll probably relieve me of command for it. The mining consortiums have too much influence with the Admiralty, but I've fought in enough wars to know when we're on the wrong side of the tactical equation." The Wolf Admiral choosing mercy over strategic advantage. Daniel couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. "The fleet will be shocked." Something that might have been a smile flickered across her face. "The fleet doesn't know me. They know the persona I constructed to survive in a military that doesn't trust women with real power. Cold, calculating, willing to sacrifice anything for victory." She closed her eyes. "But I'm not a wolf. I'm just someone trying to keep as many people alive as possible in an uncaring universe." The pod's sensors chimed softly. Orla's core temperature had reached 98.6 degrees. Normal. Safe. She should pull away now, get dressed, return to being the Admiral. But she didn't move, and neither did Daniel. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not hesitating when it mattered." "It's my duty, Admiral." "Orla," she corrected. "In here I'm just Orla, someone who made a mistake and nearly died for it." Daniel felt the weight of that trust, the vulnerability in her admission. Outside, the methane storms howled against the tent's reinforced walls. Inside the pod, two people who had been strangers an hour ago had become something else, witnesses to each other's humanity in a place that seemed designed to strip it away. "We should get dressed," Orla said finally, though she made no immediate move to leave the warmth of the pod. "The storms will clear in another hour. I need to get back to the Fenrir and file my report before anyone questions why I was down here so long." They separated carefully, the cold air raising goosebumps as they climbed out and began dressing. Daniel watched Orla transform back into the Admiral with each piece of equipment she donned: the thermal suit, the rank insignia, the emotional armor that was just as protective as the physical kind. At the tent's entrance, she paused. "What happened here stays classified under survival protocol regulations." "Understood, Admiral." "But Daniel," she looked back at him, and for just a moment he saw Orla again beneath the Admiral's mask. "When we evacuate Fenris 7, and we will, I'll need commanders I can trust in the fight ahead. Officers who understand that preserving life is just as important as winning battles." Then she was gone, back into the frozen hell of Fenris 7, leaving Daniel alone with the memory of shared warmth in the cold dark, and the knowledge that the Wolf Admiral was more human than anyone suspected.